Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. Welcome back to you too, Ben. How are you?
Good, mate. You?
Very, very good. Thank you. Looking forward to a long weekend this weekend.
A little bit of a 4-day break always helps, mate. And yeah, hopefully, I've got a little bit of news for people also that might sort of, brighten up their day if they're interested in a bit of property research.
All right. Well, let's get to that. I'm going to step back in time 2 hours. I'm going to lose 3 hours. Go back to Perth. By the time I come back, I'll get 2 hours. So daylight saving will end this Easter Sunday. So you get a little sleep in for all those folks affected by daylight savings. But all right, we have hit 2,000 reviews, Ben. Just like that, our community has responded. So incredibly grateful for that. Thank you. The majority have been 5, which is a big relief for us, Ben. There was a 4. I think there was a 3. Didn't get any 1s. So, but we said that. But I've got a couple to read out, and just to prove that I'm going to be transparent on a couple of the ones that I'm going to read out. But as we've talked about, we've got our course launch coming up around the 19th of April, which we only do twice a year. So it's our full course, 12 plus hours. Pretty much walking people how to build a property portfolio, Ben. We're going to do it at a heavily discounted price during this time. So in the lead up to that, we are reading out some reviews, giving away some courses. Thanks for everyone helping us hit that 2,000. First review I'm going to read out is from Caleb J. Will. Fully invested. After committing myself to a year of financial change, I stumbled across a book at the library called The Armchair Guide to Property Investing, How to Retire on $2,000 a Week. I went home and brought the book, read it in days. Once I finished the book, I was fully invested, in brackets, pardon the pun, in Ben and Blake's knowledge. All right? So Ben and Blake's knowledge and strategies. This podcast keeps me in the loop and update without suffering FOMO. Thank you guys for teaching me on my way to work and changing my mindset on money and making me realize investing in property is achievable for me and my wife with a young family. So I'm super excited. On behalf of Blake and Ben, we are excited that you are fully invested. And the second one there is Superstars of the Cause. This is from Joey 2112RT. So Joey, let us know. Superstars of the Cause. Do yourself a huge favor and listen to these two blokes and educate yourself on money management and property investment. Listen to nearly every episode, and with so much gold to absorb, I think I'll have to cut another round to realize it all. Told everyone I know about this podcast. The only criticism I have is Bryce does get a bit carried away with his school level analogies. Sorry, Bryce. Still love you. I don't know, Ben, can't win them all, but just to show that we are open to all sorts of feedback.
Oh, totally.
Joey,
totally,
211-2RT. Email the Stig. You'll get a free copy of the course, and Caleb J. will email the Stig. You will also get a free copy of the course. We're going to give a couple away.
Your name now, mate. Bryce gave me the free course. Won't Blake? It'll be Bryce.
Exactly. Love it. Hey, you've got some news you said for people who love research.
Yeah, look, ultimately our Location Score product as part of our Select Residential Property Research Suite. Look, we started it 4 years ago. It's very popular. Over 1,500 people have subscribed to the service. We're just letting our community know that the price is going up, right? So we still have to invest heavily into that part of our business. So we are putting our prices up. So it was going up on the 1st today, actually. It was going up today. So I've pushed it to Monday.
Is this a joke?
No.
1st of April?
No, it's not an April Fool, Bryce.
Oh, okay.
So prices are going up. But if you get your subscription in before the 5th, you will be on the lower price point, and you will be able to stay on that price point indefinitely until
grandfathered.
Finish up that subscription. So just letting you know, last opportunity, just go to locationscore.com.au and you can subscribe before Monday, before the price hike.
Okay, very good.
Happy Easter. There you go. Just keeping it. And don't forget 20% off for all of
20%.
our TPC listeners. Just in the promo code TPC20, you'll get 20% off that price as well. So not only will you not pay market price, you'll get a 20% discount off that as well.
I like it. Hey, did the boys catch you with any April Fool's jokes this morning, or did you leave too early and they didn't catch you?
I always try and get out there. Harry's the one who likes to play tricks on me. So, but this particular day, it can happen any day with him. So no, I didn't get any tricks. What about you?
No, mate. That it's still early. We're recording in the morning here, but
it only happens until midday, isn't it? Because obviously Collingwood's playing the Brisbane Lions tonight. They thought they were going to play in the Gabba. The biggest April Fool is we're playing at a neutral venue in Melbourne, by the looks of things. So here we are. Right.
Yeah. Hey, there's a Gordon Ramsay on Instagram. There's a little viral thing my kids were laughing at where Gordon Ramsay's daughter pretends to put an egg into a water bottle.
Yeah.
And then she does this little sleight of hand trick. And then Gordon Ramsay, you could see him go, what just happened? So all of a sudden he looks into the top of the bottle. She squeezes the bottle. Water splashes all over his face. And then whilst he's leaning over, she grabs the egg that she put in the other hand, just slammed it and smashed it on his head. And he was such a good sport about it. So
when you have daughters like that, I mean, woof.
So I'm half expecting to get one of those sorts of things because the kids watched it over and over and over again. So I think they were trying to master the little act there. So, hey, my Mindset Minute theme today is chapter 27 on how to win people to your way of thinking through the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, how to spur people on to success. Pete Barlow was an old friend of mine. He had a dog and pony act and spent his life traveling with circuses and vaudeville shows. I love to watch Pete train new dogs for his act. I noticed that the moment a dog showed the slightest improvement, Pete patted and praised him and gave him meat and made a great to-do about it. That's nothing new. Animal trainers have been using that same technique for centuries. Why, I wonder, don't we use the same common sense when trying to change people that we use when trying to change dogs? Why don't we use meat instead of a whip? Why don't we use praise instead of condemnation? Let us praise even the slightest improvement. That inspires the other person to keep on improving. In his book, I Ain't Much, Baby, But I Am All I Got, the psychologist Jess Lair comments, praise is like sunlight to warm the human spirit. We cannot flower and grow without it. And yet, while most of us are only too ready to apply to others the cold wind of criticism, we are somehow reluctant to give our fellow the warm sunshine of praise. Remember, we all crave appreciation and recognition and will do almost anything to get it. But nobody wants insincerity. Nobody wants flattery. The principles taught in this book will work only when they come from the heart. I am not advocating a bag of tricks. I am talking about a new way of life. Abilities wither under criticism. They blossom under encouragement. So to become an effective or more effective leader of people, apply principle 27, praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. There you go, Ben.
Oh, mate, I think that's a ripper. And can I praise the purple machine on the weekend? I mean, they were very good. They ran in numbers. And Mundy, I mean, what a game he had off halfback. Right. It was superb at 36 years of age. You can't get any more praise. The guy's a gun. Thank
you for practicing what I was preaching. I did put a little note here to role play with Ben, and I came up short, mate. I couldn't think. I couldn't come up with anything to praise you, but I'm sure if I keep looking, I look hard enough, I will find something. So I appreciate that. After 6 years, I probably should have had a few more in the bank. But mate, we've got a very special guest today. I'm excited to introduce a returning guest. Let's cut to the interview that we had recently with Hayley Mitchell. All right, Ben, we've got a very special guest today. We are interviewing Hayley Mitchell. Hayley is a fully licensed real estate agent and the director of Mitchell PT, which provides training and consulting in the property management industry. Hayley has worked in real estate since 1999 and has always worked in property management. Property management, you could say, is her passion. Making a return to the couch after first appearing on episode 248 back in September the 5th, 2019. Welcome back to the Property Couch, Hayley.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back, Hayley.
It's good to have you back. Hey, look, we're super excited to chat to you today. Wow, excited? We're super keen to talk to you about the topic of today. We're excited to talk to you, but the topic is really interesting, which is around the legislative changes in Victoria around residential property, and there's a whole range of stuff that we're going to talk about. But we couldn't let the opportunity go before we dive into that to just get you to tell us a little bit about what life was like as a property manager during COVID-19.
Look, it wasn't great, to be honest. I think a lot of people really, really struggled during COVID. We're lucky enough that we actually have a regional rent roll. So we're pretty well full steam ahead for most of it. But I know our friends and colleagues in Melbourne have really struggled and are still struggling. And I own a couple of properties in Melbourne, and they were affected by COVID, meaning the rents dropped, anywhere up to 20%, and large vacancy rates as well. But being in the sort of Geelong region, we've been flying over the last 12 months. So I think at the worst of it, we had maybe 2 tenants on rent relief, which is incredible considering what the Melbourne and inner city were affected by. So
yeah, it would have been interesting for you when we went in that 5-day stage 4 lockdown, because it was the first time regional Victoria had to experience that. The kind of 5 days was palatable compared to what everyone up in the Big Smoke had to endure, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we had that very quick 5-day lockdown, and it was actually a little bit of a mini break for us. So we kind of had things booked in and then went, okay, we've got a lockdown, let's just work from home and entertain the kids. And we're lucky that we actually live on a farm, so it's a lot easier just to get outside and be in the fresh air. So I actually found it a nice little reset. But I can tell you, I know a lot of people that went through that sort of 3-month lockdown in Melbourne, wasn't it? And that was extreme.
Yeah, I'm with you. I was in stage 3, so Ben experienced it stage 4. But yeah, it'd be fair to say it was a challenge for property management. Now we want to pivot and talk about the topic of today. And for the benefit of our listeners who maybe not in Victoria or who aren't across the changes, can you give us a brief summary of what your world's been like for the last couple of weeks and why?
Yeah, why? It's a little bit crazy because we've been planning for this since 2018, and then the last couple of months it's just felt like it's gone really fast. So because last year we actually had no time at all to actually think towards what was happening with the RTA changes. And we were expecting to get a copy of the regulations back in, I think it was November, and then they pushed it to December. Then they said you'll have it in Jan. And then it was like the last week in Jan when we finally got the regs. And the interesting thing is the legislation obviously kicks in from 29th of March, but we don't have a copy of it yet. I hopped on the website about an hour ago and looked it up and thought, where is it? And they said, I think they said we're under a high volume of work at the moment, so we're working on it. We'll get it to you soon. So look, we do have the bill that was passed back in 2018, but we actually don't have the written legislation as yet. So we're all kind of hanging out for that, so we can then cross-reference all of the information and put it all together. And I know I'm really looking forward to my 500-page read of it because I love my legislation. But it would have been really good to actually have it out today where we could actually look at it and read it and cross-reference and be prepared.
So Hayley, as we're going to air, are you telling me that when the legislation went live on the 29th of March that a government didn't actually even have the regulations available for people to practice?
Yeah, we've got the regulations. We don't have the legislation.
Oh, okay.
Which is what this all is about.
So you can't be prosecuted, but you just got to follow a set of rules, right? That's interesting.
That we don't have.
That we don't have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting that a government would release a bit of legislative change without the actual laws being documented, isn't it?
And I actually emailed CAB, Consumer Affairs Victoria, a couple of weeks ago, and I said, hey, obviously this is all kicking in. Can I have a copy of the legislation? They're like, yeah, you'll get it on the day. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. We still don't have it. So,
but the day's come and gone. And rightio, okay, that's interesting.
Hayley, we encouraged our community to listen into this podcast, even if they didn't live in Victoria, because it may be coming around the country. But you've talked about the 29th of March being significant. What are the significant highlights, or from 30,000 feet that has actually changed, and how will that impact?
Well, there's 132 changes. For me, the most important or the highest impact for our clients, that meaning our residential rental providers, is the minimum standards. So that's a large portion of, I guess, there's going to be extra costs for landlords to actually hold their properties in the future. And then we've obviously got the safety compliance aspect of that as well. So they're probably the main two areas that I guess most landlords are concerned about, because it is going to cost more money to actually hold properties in the future.
Hayley, who's going to pay for all these extra costs in the end?
Well, the interesting thing is landlords or residential rental providers. However, if you go back to the regulatory impact statement that was put out back in November 2019, where they were given, we were given a copy of those draft regulations, and I think you guys actually put forward submissions as well about what you wanted to see or not see changed. If you read that document carefully, it goes back to, if we bring heating into this high level standard, for example, this is how much of a dollar impact that will be on the tenants or the renters. So I think ultimately at the end of the day, the renters are going to be paying for it. I also personally believe that part of what is coming with this legislation and regulations is that the quality of properties is going to improve. And I do believe that. But at the end of the day, if the quality of a property improves and we start putting energy efficient heating into properties, then the rental prices are going to increase as well. So just to give you an example, we manage an older style property and we had it up for rent a couple of months ago, and I said to the team, yep, let's get it let, put someone in there. The owner's planning to knock it down or doing units or selling it in a couple of years. So we said, let's get it rented. Let's get someone in there and then give us 12 months to actually make plans of what we want to do with that property. Because if we need to bring it up to minimum standards, it's actually going to cost the landlord probably around the 50K mark. And you're not going to be spending that amount of money on a property that you're going to knock down. So when we put it up fairly cheap, and we had 280 inquiries on that property and over 100 applications. So What does that tell you? At the end of the day, that property is no longer going to be available for rent because the owner's not going to put 50 grand into it. He's going to knock it down or he's going to sell it as a development site. So where do those 100 applicants go? And I think that that's an unintended consequence of what we're creating with this legislation, is that properties are going to either improve or be removed from the rental market. So where do those lower price tenants go? And I'm just not sure what the answer is.
I've got a perfect example of that. Hayley, when we did our second stage of renovations on our house, we moved out for 6 months and we rented a property just like that, an old period property that was due for demolishing. So they were happy for us to go in there with some basic, they did some basic cosmetic tidy ups for us and got it livable. And we were comfortable with that. Like, it wasn't flash, it was a bit cold, but ultimately that property wouldn't have been there for us to be able to, so our family couldn't have located it. So that's just another one of the examples where, again, I get the intentions of the legislation, but when you are looking for all of these demands to be met, there are costs involved, compliance costs, and that ultimately is going to be borne by all parties who are going to participate in this marketplace.
Absolutely.
Are you surprised at some of the short-sighted thinking on some of this stuff, Hayley, or did you just nothing surprises you anymore with bureaucracy? Because ultimately it always ends up being passed through to the person who can't afford it the most. And in that example that you talked about, where stock that would be available at a lower price point is being taken off the market, it's kind of hurting the people that, in theory, is the legislation is trying to protect.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I was a little bit surprised because there was a couple of things that didn't come through in the draft regs at all that just ended up flicking through in the final regulations. And one of them was ventilation requirements. So I think that's number 13 on the minimum standards. And the other one was painting, if you remember that one sneaking through in the final regs as well, with modifications renters can make to properties. So there were a couple of things that were completely silent in the draft that just came through at the end, which did surprise me. I think more has to be done, though, for keeping properties on the market. I don't know what the answer is, but those lower price properties really do concern me, because these minimum standards, yes, although some of them are very minimum standards, you would expect them, like a working toilet, you'd hope so. But some of them, those ventilation requirements and some of the other things that have popped through there, I think are concerning because properties just won't adhere to those. And the other thing is landlords or residential rental providers don't know if their properties adhere to those. So ultimately, if they want to sign off on a disclosure statement to say their properties meet those minimum standards, they'd have to get a building inspection done as well. Now, how regularly would you have to have a building inspection done? And that cost is going to be around about that $500 mark. So there's all these little bits to it that, end up really costing a lot of money.
So let's go through some of those rental minimum standards. So we've got Vernon proof bins compatible with council collection, toilets connected to a system in a room of intended use, bathroom facilities, hot and cold water supply, 3-star shower head, 2-star if a 3-star wouldn't work effectively, kitchen facilities, dedicated area for cooking and food prep, sink with hot and cold water, stove top in good working order, plus 2 burners, laundry facilities, hot and cold water supply, structural soundness, including being waterproof, and mold and dampness, free of mold and damp caused by related to the building structure. They're the main ones in there, aren't they, Hayley? Is there any others that surprised you?
Yeah, ventilation, that was one that did surprise me. So having to make the properties adhere to those ventilation requirements, whether it be a class 1 house, class 2 apartment. I'm not a builder by any stretch, so it's something that I definitely couldn't instruct my clients that their properties do or don't adhere to. So that's probably a concerning one, I would say. I think the other one, the heating component, is also another one that obviously was a bit different than what we thought was coming through in the draft regs. So having to have that energy efficient heater in all properties across Victoria, not just houses, because originally they sort of said, well, it would be houses and apartments would just have to have a fixed heater. But when it came through in the final regs, then obviously energy efficient heating. So that's your split system, your gas space heater, hydronic or ducted heating with an outlet in the main living area and a slow combustion wood heater. So obviously if you've got an apartment and it's going to cost way too much to get it installed, or Owners Corporation says you don't have to, then you can just have your fixed heater. But that's a huge cost. And I was chatting, I did a landlord information night down in Bairnsdale a couple of weeks ago, and I was chatting to one of the landlords there, and she was saying that she has 5 units and they're bringing in $150 a week each. And she said, I've only got a panel heater on the walls in the living room. And I said, well, technically you will have to get a energy efficient heater. And she goes, how much are they? I said, well, probably $2,000, $2,500. And she goes, there's just no way I can do that. She said, I've got asset, but I don't necessarily have, $2,500 I can spend per property when that's 4 or 5 months rent. And I've still got to pay the mortgage. So you've got people who are on paper wealthy, but they don't have that price point or that spare money to improve the property to the standard it needs to be.
No free cash flow. And it's not like it was around the negative gearing debate where it was a grandfathered thing. This applies across all properties, right? So, get ready or else. I think it kind of reinforces, Ben, in Victoria, particularly the mantra that we've had for 6 years is you need to have properties that have owner occupier appeal. Because imagine if you're owning stock that only has investor appeal, and then you get to the point where Hayley's just described, and you think, well, I can't afford it, I'll put it on the market, and no one wants to buy it. The investor market isn't interested. It certainly will create a scenario where people may have a double whammy where A, they're stumped for being able to get it to minimum standard, and B, they can't sell it because there's no market for what they want for the reasons of why they want to sell it.
That's right, Bryce. That secondary market is important, right, in terms of the resale. And so if you think about those people who buy those sort of cash flow assets, or a cash flow neutral or slightly cash flow positive, with not only, these regulations around energy efficiency, but you've also got electrical safety checks, electrical heating, you've got window light fittings, you've got window coverings coming in March 2022. So all of a sudden, that money that you're anticipating to come in from the property to cover all costs ain't there for a couple of years. So it potentially means, and let's be honest, that the people who are more well off, who can invest that money rather than the middle class and the lower middle class mum and dads, who we're thrilled that they're trying to put something away for a wealthier tomorrow. Sorry, you're going to be priced out, because there's, the only people who have a little bit more money who will be able to come in and make those, as Hayley's example, the $2,000 improvements. Now, they're still probably going to lift the rent, but they can handle a bit of cash flow interruption and potentially two of those, little villas being offline for 6 weeks or waiting for that tenant to turn up. But it's just, unfortunately, it's just going to hurt the tenant at the end of the day. Now, especially if the tenant was actually quite happy that wall heater was efficient and they were happy to have that in that, and they were happy to sign off on a lower rent. Imagine if they can put they could put a disclosure in there, or no, I'm happy with what I've got. The condition of the property meets my requirements. Leave me alone.
There's no flexibility at all, is there? It's just, none. And one of the other things is obviously electrical safety. Like, you've got to bring all your properties up to the minimum standard from March 2023, and that minimum standard is up to today. So, if you've got a 100-year-old house, or you've got an older style house, your switchboard will have to be brought up to today's requirements, which is fine. I understand that, pull out the ceramic fuses. But if you have old wiring, potentially there's going to be a lot of properties that need rewiring. And we manage a lot of properties in that ballpark at the moment, where we're starting to prepare the landlords that, hey guys, 2 years time, potentially you're going to be up to 5 to 10 grand to rewire your property. So what do you want to do? Do we start budgeting? Do we get quotes now? We're getting our electrical safety checks done quicker on those properties, so that we can then get a quote for the landlord to say, hey, in 2 years time, we need to spend this much money to bring it up to where it needs to be. So it's been making sure that we've been proactive as well, because we don't want to turn around to our clients in 2 years time and go, hey, do you have a spare 10 grand?
Well, what's also interesting about that is one of our picker members, I think Daniel it was, who reached out to me. He said, so I'm trying to find all of these codes, right? The gas code, the electricity code. You've got to buy the codes. Like, they're not even making the code minimum requirements available. You've actually got to fork out money to actually get access to what the codes are. Now, I find that absolutely ludicrous, that a government who's asking you to make your assets up to code, to not make the Australian standard code available free of charge for the user to actually get their property up to code. So another perfect example of, the left hand not talking to the right hand, and everyone just expecting that, the landlord will, got to put their hand in their pocket. Well, again, it'll flow on, unfortunately, in regards to lack of supply and higher rents.
Absolutely. Yep.
Have you got your head around the terminology changes? I noticed you did a little pivot before, said landlords, and quickly went to residential rental provider, or RRP. How are you going with that?
Yeah, I'm not going very well.
We're a national show, Bryce. We're a national show, so we're just going to say landlord. Unfortunately, as much as the Victorian Tenancy Association wants it to be called, rental property what are they?
Landlords will be referred to as residential rental providers. Tenants will be referred to as renters, and a lease agreement will be referred to as a residential rental agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just because we need to be different, and and Australians, what do we like to do? Make things longer? I don't think so. We like the things to be shorter in name, not 3 words instead of 1. Anyway.
Resi Rennie provider.
RRP. What's that?
Recommended retail price. So
just say landlord. Everyone understands what that means.
Yeah.
So I've come up from the perspective too that as a buyer's agent, it's changing the way that you will be buying in Victoria as well, because you need to have a bit of a sense of where you're at. So clearly you used to go in and get a building and pest inspection. Well, now you're going to have to go and get an electrical inspection, which includes a gas safety inspection. You're probably going to make sure that you've got a smoke alarm safety compliance as well, which in Queensland that's happening. So there's a whole bunch of things that you will need to do in the entry to purchase. And think about in Victoria when you go and oops, missed that one at auction. Oh, okay, let's go and rinse and repeat on the next one. It's adding layers of cost for people, which makes a difference.
I think a lot of your building inspectors will actually come up with a investors package potentially, so that when they go through the property, they'll check all those 14 compliance items or minimum standards to make sure that you comply. And then obviously your gas, electrical and pool barriers, safety check, your smoke alarm. So, there's really 18 things that you need to tick off on prior to putting the property on the market for rent.
But their price will go up too, as you'd imagine. And then, but then getting behind furniture to get to windows that ordinarily you wouldn't be able to check on the ventilation, and it'll just blow out time and it'll blow out costs just to get that done. So, do you see a time when maybe there's a pivot where if someone's selling a property that there may be a disclosure requirement to get that sort of stuff done for the buyer, so they're not going through multiple expenses, or do you think it'll always be on the buyer side?
It's interesting. I have come across a company at the moment that does those pre-purchase checks, and they actually do them on behalf of the vendors, and then they provide that information either for a fee or they include it in. And I've been talking to them about the compliance aspects. So I think that's something that those sort of companies will come forward and say, hey, we can actually do this. And if the vendor got it done, then it means that you can sell the property and they get that information. So that could potentially be, I think, moving forward, if you sell an investment property or property that could suit investment, that's actually a really good way to do it.
If you want to keep that part of the market in it, you'd have to be doing stuff like that.
Well, there's precedence there, right? I mean, in the ACT, that's exactly how the onus is on the vendor to actually provide all of that compliance information as part of their warranty of sale, right? And I think that's probably where we're moving to. It is untenable to think that you would have a situation where a property buyer, let's say a first home buyer who saved for 5 years a deposit to buy a house, and every time they go to compete on a property, they're dropping $1,000 on building pest, electrical safety check, gas safety check, all of these checks that the government is now requiring Victorian properties to undertake. And so could you imagine, I mean, where we get movement on this in terms of common sense approach is, one, obviously someone sees a marketing opportunity. So it would, if I was a selling agent, I'd absolutely be saying to my vendor, if you want the 30% of the market who thinks this is a good investment property, you should go and get these and whack them into your Section 32 into your vendor statement. It would be crazy if you didn't, because if we have 4 or 5 interested buyers, but they've all got to go off and do those independent inspections, it's just going to go arse up. So my view is it does make sense that if everyone reaches out to their local politicians and tells them this is ridiculous. I mean, because what happens again with unaffordable housing and you're also seeing underquoting and all that, how do we get those rules and regulations changed? Is enough people just say this is ridiculous. Whether you're an owner occupier or an investor, you're going to have to undertake these types of checks in a way because you want the place to be safe. But certainly from an investor's point of view, it just makes no sense to me at all that I'm going to be dropping $1,000 on every property and still miss out on 3 or 4 of them before I finally get to one.
Yeah, it absolutely opens up the market, doesn't it? When if you're proactive and get that done prior.
And if they legislate that way, that just says it's part of the compliance piece. See, that's sensible, right? Like, why didn't they? Okay, we've got all of these big changes coming in, but you're whacking us for all of our existing properties. You're going to whack us for any new properties we want to buy. Just common sense, really.
Yeah, I agree.
There's some new disclosure requirements as well. Do you want to talk us through some of the stranger ones there for you?
Oh, number one, it'd be really good if they gave us a copy of the disclosure statement. So that would probably make everyone's life really easy. But they haven't. So I'm assuming we're not getting one, or maybe it's in the process of getting created at the moment. We've actually created our own. So we just thought, well, we need to have something working. So let's just create our own. And then if we actually get one from CAV later down the track, we can just flick over. But we've got properties we need to lease today and we need a disclosure statement. So yeah, some of the things on the disclosure statement, some of them are really simple. Like if a property is on the market for sale, meaning that you've already signed an authority or organise a contracted sale with a solicitor, you'd need to disclose that. I completely understand that one, because there's nothing more annoying than moving into a property as a renter and then 2 days later going, by the way, it's for sale. And I completely understand that one.
Yeah.
If a mortgagee is taking possession of a property, that's another one that the landlord will have to disclose. Any embedded electricity networks need to be disclosed as well. Probably the big one on the disclosure statement is the fact that the owner has to disclose that their property meets the minimum standards. So they're the 14 that we sort of talked about just before. But part of what they've done with the minimum standards is a property that's leased after 29th of March 2021 has to adhere to minimum standards. And they're the 14. If a property doesn't adhere to the minimum standards, the renter can apply to VCAT, and, or number one, they can fix it as an urgent repair up to $2,500, or they can apply to VCAT for a hearing about the minimum standards. Now, if it goes to a hearing and the property has been leased and it doesn't adhere to minimum standards, let's say it doesn't have the correct heater in the main living area, then there is a potential that there's a breach against the owner and an order against the owner, and then the owner automatically goes on that non-compliance register, which is the bad landlord register for 3 years, which is that searchable public register. Or the other part of it is it then has penalty units on it as well, which is 60 penalty units. So 60 times 165.22 is just under $10,000 fine. So we as property managers and owners, landlords, also have to make sure that their properties meet those minimum standards, and they actually have to sign the disclosure statement saying that they do. So it's just, it all kind of intertwines. And, you know, if the landlord doesn't do it, tenant can get it done, they go on the bad landlord register, they get fined. It's just, it's
yeah, and it's a fine line, isn't it? Because you got to, if the tenant knows enough to actually take them is one, and then it seems like the docket at VCAT's going to be chockers. Wow.
Yes. Yes.
So just to give you an example of how slow VCAT's been, we did a bond and compensation claim back in March last year, and we're still waiting for it. And we actually contacted VCAT and said, hey, it's been over 12 months. How far away is it? And they're like, oh, we'll probably hear those in 2022. So, you know, it's crazy. Like, we are waiting years at the moment for bond and compensation. I don't know how they're going to catch up to move forward.
There's one here that says the RRP is known to be contaminated due to prior use for trafficking, cultivation of a drug dependence in the last 5 years. What would happen if you're in a say you're in a building of 12 flats, let's call it, and someone within the building is, so let's just call it unit 11 and you're unit 4. Does unit 4 need to disclose that unit 11 has had some challenges?
I would say not, because that property is not owned by the RRP. I would say only if they own the property.
No, that makes sense, but it's kind of...
yeah. The other one is the homicide. So if
last 5 years.
Yeah, been location of a homicide in the last 5 years, and that's the property or common area. So that would include the whole property if you're in an apartment block, I gather. In
your experience, how has that affected potential tenants?
Suicide or natural causes, absolutely. But homicide, no. We very rarely even deal with that. So yeah, it's a funny one, that one.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, we're obviously being a little critical of the legislation. There is some really important elements here that do provide the tenant with confidence that, you know, that they get what they pay for, or what do they say? Quiet enjoyment is the terminology, the legal terminology that some would refer to in commercial properties, and I'm sure they'll refer to it in sort of domestic properties as well. They've expanded their definition of urgent repairs, which I think is reasonable. Can you take us through those, Hayley?
Yeah, so air conditioning will become an urgent repair. It doesn't mean that you have to install air conditioning, but if it has, it breaks down, urgent repair to fix. We've actually got really good guidelines. I was just looking around to see if I've got them, but we've got guidelines around urgent repairs. And I don't know if you've read those documents, the 5 main guidelines that have come out. They're actually really good, because often a renter will call us, you know, on a Saturday night at 5 o'clock in the afternoon and say, my hot water service broke. and you're like, great, turn off the water, we'll get someone out as soon as we can. But sometimes as soon as we can is Monday, because you don't have a plumber driving around with that exact make and model of hot water unit to put it in. So most people are really reasonable with that, but sometimes people are like, I want it done now. And those guidelines are really good because it actually explains how quickly things have to be fixed, what the process is, what is the word immediate, because when you say immediate, you think the plumber will turn up on the door in 5 minutes.
My Uber will be here in 7 minutes with my new hot water system.
How good would that be, right? So yeah, that's good. I think increasing it to $2,500 is fair. You know, you can't get a hot water unit replaced for $1,800 anymore. So I don't have an issue with that. And the fact that we have to reimburse the renter within 7 days, I think fair. You know, if they're out of pocket, absolutely. So I don't have any issue with the urgent repairs. And I actually think moving forward with the detailed guidelines and fact sheets that we're being given, it's going to make all of our jobs a lot easier.
Yeah, I think once everyone knows the state of play and the rules of the game, those types of guidelines are terrific. I agree with you, Hayley, in terms of what that looks like.
But it does have any item that does not meet the new minimum standards. The only challenge with that is if a tenant defines that an urgent thing is on a Saturday afternoon when it could have easily been dealt with on the Monday, but the Saturday afternoon comes at a much higher premium cost. That's the grey.
But if the property has been signed off as minimum, then it should, you know, like ultimately they can't rediscover something new. You wouldn't have thought, you'd hope that, you know, everything's been signed off and it is meeting those minimum standards.
One of the ones that does concern me, and I'm still waiting for some clarification, which we haven't got yet, is a pest infestation. So what is a pest infestation? And that's something that's always really grey. You know, can a renter say, hey, I've got ants in my property, you need to get pest person out here, or can you just put in 2 drops of ant red and walk away and they'll be gone in 24 hours? So I want more clarity around what is a pest infestation and to what level. And then obviously mould and damp has come through really strongly in the regulations and the legislation. So that will become an urgent repair as well, but only if it's caused by or related to the building structure. So you've got rising damp, falling damp, roof leaks, mould. But technically, if a renter just doesn't turn on the fan when they shower and there's mould on the ceiling, that would come back to them. But they're the grey areas of who's at fault. Same with the pests. You know, who's at fault? What created the situation where you've got them in the property? So there are a couple of grey ones. Safety related devices as well. So your smoke alarm or your pool barrier, they've come under urgent repairs, which again, fantastic. They should be there and they should have been there 20 years ago.
All safety ones should be there. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But, you know, we said it before, we'll say it again. Like anything that can be done to stop slumlords should be done. Everyone is 100% proactive in making sure that, but it's just the, I guess, encompassing all properties as a result of trying to eliminate that.
I had a tenant once, Bryce, in the Sydney property. I had the pest inspector out for ants 3 times in a month.
Wow.
And I was trying to get a gauge on, you know, the infestation, because I'm thinking 3 times in a month, it's a bit too much. And yeah, she spotted 2 ants on the kitchen bench top, which I'm like, oh my God, how do I solve for that?
Fly swat.
Well, I don't know what to do. But that, unfortunately, sometimes, you know, in that particular case, we had to talk to the property manager, and then the property manager had to talk to the owners of the property, and they came to the conclusion, yes, that we were doing everything that we could possibly do based on the best professional advice we could possibly get to limit the number of, you know, ant movements in the house. And so, you know, we got to a conclusion on that. But it is, you know, there's extremes on both sides. You know, this lady was very particular about the property, and, you know, this property is 120 years old. So ultimately, you know, they are the types of, you know, with lots of cracks and so forth. So, you know, ant penetration or whatever could potentially come in there. So I don't know what the answer is there, but that's just an example of, you know, where you've got to hopefully strike a balance of open communication and talking. And when the professionals are saying we can't do anything more, you know, what's the next step, right?
I agree.
Sales inspection compensation. Some tenants can make some money here. Can you talk us through that?
I don't mind it.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
It's always been there. Let's be honest. It
Yeah.
just hasn't been legislated. There's always been sort of carrot dangling to try and make it happen. But
Absolutely.
now it's what's it saying? 1/2 of the daily amount of rent payable under the RRA per inspection, or $30, whichever is the higher.
Yeah. So basically, if your rent's less than $4.20 a week, you're going to be paying them $30 an inspection. If your rent's over $4.20 a week, it'd be half a day's rent. You need to serve a renter with a notice of intention to sell at least 14 days prior to putting the property on the market for sale as well. And then, you know, if you wanted to go through and do photos and videos, you give 7 days notice for that. So if you look at doing an auction campaign, let's just pretend that you're doing 2 opens a week for 4 weeks, so 8 opens, and your rent's $4.50 a week, you're only giving them back 4 days of rent. So usually with our landlords, we say, hey, you've got a great tenant in there, let's comp them a week's free rent at the end of the sale campaign. And this is actually less than what most agents have been doing for years. So, and you can of course give more, but the prescribed amount will be that minimum. So I don't mind it at all. I had a conversation when you were talking before about difficult landlords, and I'm just going to give you an example. I won't say where I was. But I had a landlord come up to me and she said, I refuse to pay my renters for sales. And I said, okay. I said, so why? And she goes, well, you know, they're living in my house and, you know, I just don't think if I want to put my property on the market for sale that I should have to compensate them. I said, okay. I said, so how much is your rent? She goes, $3.50 a week. I said, great. I said, so say you do a campaign and you 2 opens a week for 4 weeks at 8. So it'll be 8 times 30, $240 you'll reimburse your tenant for a sale. She goes, I'm not paying it. I said, okay. Your other option is get the tenant out, run a campaign, wait for settlement. You know, you're probably going to have a vacancy of 3 to 4 months whilst you're going through that process. So you'll lose about $6,000. What would you prefer? And she said, well, I will lose the $6,000 because I refuse to pay the $240. And I said, really? She said, yeah. She goes, it's principle. I said, no, what you've got to understand, when you let out your property, it's no longer an emotional attachment. It becomes a business arrangement. And you've got to look at it from a business stance. What makes more sense? And I said, I can tell you, I wouldn't want to lose $6,000. I'd rather just pay the $240. And she goes, no. I'm like, okay, that's fine. So it was really interesting looking at that side of the equation, because usually when I sort of give those examples, people go, yeah, that makes sense, but it didn't.
Well, it just goes to show there's the 5% of landlords who make life tough for the rest of us, like the 5% of tenants who make life tough for landlords. It's just, and we regulate down to those 5% because the squeakiest cogs get the most oil. And when they're the ones who are going to the tenancy board or whatever they're doing and you know, putting up their claims, that's the only noise. That's the only noise they get. They don't get the other side of it, like the, you know, the rent theft that's going on at the moment with interstate owners and all those. They're just blinded to that sort of story as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are some under the proposal, under the legislation, minor modifications which can be made without the RRP's consent, and then there's modifications that do require but not unreasonably withhold. We went through a few of those when we had you on previously. So are there any there that you feel need to be highlighted that maybe surprised you, or do you feel that there's which ones do you think are reasonable versus unreasonable?
Couple of things that came up. Fly screens. So that came up that a renter can do, which surprised me. I'm actually surprised fly screens didn't come in on minimum standards for landlords, just because, I don't know, I always thought that would end up sneaking through and it didn't. So I think that's a positive, that if a renter wants them, they can do them at their cost and they can either negotiate with the landlord to leave them or take them away. The one that snuck in was painting. So that one really did sneak, I feel. That wasn't in the draft.
Under the require consent or the not require consent?
They do require consent for that one, but a landlord can't unreasonably refuse. And one of the things it actually says, if a renter believes that a landlord has unreasonably refused consent, they can apply to VCAT for hearing, and VCAT will hear it within 5 days.
VCAT won't have any time.
5 days, the legislation.
They're going to be chock-a-block.
5 days in 2023. And we'll tell you what those 5 days will be, right?
When you get your call up, it'll be within 5 days. But no guarantee that's in the 2020s. Yeah.
Well, the sad bit about that is they'll then try and rubber stamp things, right? So, proved, and then all of a sudden, again, the poor old property owner will be left out of pocket. Or, you know, if they want purple and pink pastel decorations in their main living area, that's now they do have to obviously make good. So we need to also explain that they need to make good back to the original condition of the property.
One other thing that came up on that. So we've got the regulations, and the regulations say what renters can do with and without consent. But then if you look at the CAV website, they've also put extra ones on the website that aren't in the regulations. So, for example, a pet door. So a pet door is under the second half, so they have to ask permission and you can't unreasonably refuse, but that's not in the actual regulations.
Robert, you missed, mate. You put it on, mate. You forgot to put it in the regs. You put it on the web. Rob, you need to come back, mate. We need to fix this up.
It's crazy.
I can just imagine the room. I can just see it happening. Robert, don't worry. I know you left your automatic reticulating water system on at home, and you want to go and catch the tram to get back to fix that, mate. But we've got some work to do here, buddy.
So it's just crazy because we're trying to obviously follow everything, but the information's not like, it's not right. And when I got all the information through last week and I downloaded all the forms and I started reading through them, for example, they put on there that threats and intimidations under an immediate notice to vacate, but it's actually 14 days. So I've sent so many emails through to CAV going, hey, this is wrong here, this is not right here, this isn't on here, it needs to be here. And so I've actually got a contact at CAV who's been responding to me, and I've been giving him ideas because he said to me, anything that you see, please let us know. Because if we can get everything more black and white and clear, it will make everyone's jobs easier. So I can't even tell you how many emails I've been sending, but I am getting responses. So we'll see.
And look, I'm having a bit of fun before. I mean, of course, it's major reform legislation. There are going to be some dotting I's and crossing of T's. We can't get it right always. I mean, we are talking about the government here. Hey, the big one for me is still on the 120 days.
Yep.
Like, what are we going to do? Like, what are our options if we really do have that most challenging of tenants, and we have just a relationship breakdown, and both sides are trying to dig their heels in. Like, what are our options, Hayley?
Really, your option is to cancel a tenancy in the first year. So once you go past that initial fixed term, or as CAV put in the reforms, the first trial period, meaning the first lease, it's going to be very difficult to remove a tenant moving forward. So unless you've got a reason.
So you have to do that within the first 9 months, effectively.
Yeah. So you've got to serve that 90 days out from the end of the tenancy, basically, plus postage.
And so what if you had a 2-year or a 3-year? Is that still 90 days from that first term?
No, 90 days towards the end of the lease.
So if it's a 2-year, it's obviously, what are we talking there? 21 months or whatever that you have to. So is that going to be something that property managers are going to be recommending? Like what is, if I was ringing you now and I said, look, I want to rent a property down in Geelong, what are some of my options in terms of how I, navigate my way through this only place in Australia where this particular legislation exists?
So we've been doing slightly longer first initial lease terms. So, we've been recommending to a lot of owners maybe do a 15-month lease or an 18-month lease so that we've got that longer trial period. The other thing we've got to be aware of, we want to do our 2 routines and then have enough time to still serve that notice to vacate.
Yeah.
So they have put in the reform, the regulations and legislation that you can go slightly past the end of fixed term, but they haven't said what slightly is. So we want to make sure that we can do our routine at the 3rd month, the 9 month, then serve for 90-day plus postage and have enough time to get them out. But realistically, probably there'll only be maybe 5 or 10% of tenancies where we go, hey, we haven't got it right. Let's turn it over and start again. Because we don't want to be in a situation where we're not quite sure, but we let them carry forward and then we're in a situation where we just can't remove them. So that's going to be our recommendation to our landlords.
Now, what about this as an idea? So let's say you wanted to say a 24-month term. Can you give some comfort to the tenant around a break of lease in regards to having an extra clause added to the contract that says, if you do break the lease, the maximum I will charge is 2 months rent?
Well, only for long-term leases. So any lease over 5-year fixed term period, you can actually put in those sort of clauses. But break leases are now going to be recognised, pretty sure, under Section 211A from memory. When I get legislation, I'll know for sure. But break leases means you can only charge a pro rata let fee, advertise until the property's relet, or rent until the property's relet, and full advertising. So that's what's now under legislation. So you couldn't then contract something that's different than that because it's different than the legislation.
What if it's a shorter period than the legislation, which puts it in favour of the tenant?
Yeah.
So let's say you do a 5-year deal,
Yeah.
but you give them a better terms and conditions than the existing arrangement.
Yeah, potentially you can do that. The 5-year leases are a lot different. So they're more like a commercial arrangement. So that you've got a lot more flexibility with those ones.
Right. Okay.
Let's work the angles here. Hayley, you've just sort of hinted at, slightly longer initial leases. I mean, quality property management is more critical than ever. People who are in touch with the legislation like yourself are on ball, like you're actually forward thinking all of these things to make sure. But if someone's listened to this for the last 45 minutes, they'll be thinking, I wouldn't invest in Victoria. What are the angles for the people? When would you? Where's the areas where this will actually be okay, and the type of property and what needs to be done for people to actually get some optimism out of these changes? I
personally believe that it's going to improve the industry. So there's a couple that I don't like, and I'm with you, Ben, on the 120-day removal.
Yeah.
I personally believe that a landlord does have a right to say, hey, in 4 months' time, I'd like you to move out. Just like a renter can give you 28 days and go at any time. I'm disappointed that one's been removed. If they had have kept that 90-day end of fixed term tenancy notice for subsequent lease terms, I would have been okay. But that's, for me, the worst changes that have come through. The other one I don't like is the rent arrears process, which is ridiculous. Ben's shaking his head now, so it's good.
Well, we do have to talk about it. It's so ordinary that it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and we do. But I think in the future we are going to have better quality properties. We will have better quality tenants. We'll have better quality landlords.
At a higher cost, but we will have them.
We will have them, that's right. And property managers and agencies are going to have to improve as well, because we have to put in a lot of resources in the back end to make sure that we're keeping our landlords and our properties compliant and our tenants safe. So I think the next 12 months to 2 years is going to be tough. While everyone finds their feet, we get all those compliance and the safety checks done, the properties come up to those minimum standards. But I think after 2023, things are going to get easier because you're not going to have as much ad hoc maintenance. You won't have the hot water service that blows up on a Friday night because you've already had your safety checks done and they've warned you about it and they've already been fixed.
Yeah.
So I do think in the future, it's going to change the industry for the better. But I do think for the next couple of years, it's going to be a bit of a wild ride.
Yeah, and unfortunately for those people who want cheap accommodation, it's just going to be nigh impossible for you. You're going to be going into boarding houses or some other form of accommodation, which will make the people that we were trying to serve the most, which are the most vulnerable, unfortunately, will be isolated in this particular thing. But let's get to that 5-strike policy. I mean, who invents this type of stuff?
Yeah, I would love it if I just didn't.
I got a cheap shot there for you, Ben, but I'll let it go. We know who they support, who legislated this.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, it's I'm very black and white. If you owe money,
there you go. Hayley just said it, very black and white.
You pay your money when your money's due. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
Look, basically you're allowed to serve 4 notices to vacate every 12 months. It resets every 12 months. And they're allowed to then...
You've got to wait 14 days each time.
Yeah.
It like even if not after, like you haven't paid and I have to wait another 14, I haven't paid. Oh my God.
Yep. It's ridiculous. And then on the 5th strike, you can go before VCAT. And if they had have said you go before VCAT and you get possession, I would have said, okay, fair game. But they say you might get possession, you might go on a payment plan, it might get adjourned. Well, they might adjourn it and send the tenant to financial counselling to see if they can adhere to a payment plan. So all the while this is happening, rent's late, So I just can't work out why. And saying that, we don't have any renters that pay their rent continuously 14 days late.
Yeah.
So if they're going to pay and they're bad payers, they pay on the 12th or 13th day. So they're never going to get to this situation anyway.
But now they can, and now they can completely game it.
I know.
Throughout the course of the entire year. It's another form of rent theft.
And then it sets every year. So they get a clean slate and start again the next year.
Yeah, it reboot. I mean, it's not like the drug policy in the AFL. Like, that's it. You don't get every 12 months, you get 3 strikes.
Yeah.
This is, it's extraordinary policy, this piece. So I'm with you. They're the two ones. The other stuff, it's just like more costs, more compliance, more responsibility. I'll take the responsibility on, certainly from a safety point of view. And, I also think that there's domestic violence up. I want that in there. It's not strong enough. I want, women to have more protection. So, but yeah, unfortunately, we've got this situation where we've got 2 absolute shockers inside some pretty good reform. Yeah,
totally agree. And look, we'll work out ways where we can work around things as well, and work with what we've got in place. So yeah, there will be ways where we can get to the result we need to get to. We've just got to, look at the processes and the options that we have.
And I guess, what's your message to your landlords when they're ringing you up? Is it pretty much what you just said? Hey, listen, strap in for 24 months. It's still a great place. Your asset will still, we're in a state that's still highly in demand. So the reason that you invested in the first place is still really strong here. But you just got to take the bottles up the shop and get a few extra dollars so that we can so that we can pay for a few of these things.
Cash in the aluminium cans,
aluminium cans, exactly.
Yeah, we've been doing a series of videos for our clients. So we've done those through Facebook, and we've also done landlord information sessions via Zoom for them as well. And we sent out a pretty detailed email to all of our clients a couple of weeks ago, just saying, hey, these are safety related aspects we need to cover off on. And about 70 of the landlords came back and said, yep, totally understand, signing off on it, here's your form, job done. We went, great. Next day we had 4 appraisals. I'm like, oh, damn, we don't want to sell them, but if we have to, we will.
Yeah.
But yeah, there will be a lot of landlords jumping out of the market, and that in turn is going to mean that there's less properties available, which in turn puts rents up. The properties that are available will be at a higher price because we've got to put more resources and money into them. So yeah, it's just that kind of vicious cycle. But I think we're going to see a real change in who our investors are in the future. And that's something that you guys are probably already seeing through the buyer's agency.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think from our point of view, we still see the fundamentals of Melbourne and the greater Melbourne and the reaches into Geelong and Ballarat, Bendigo and Sale and all of that sort of greater distribution area. Fundamentals are pretty good for the next 10 years in terms of migration and so forth. So, but I, having done a national webinar on this, last week, there were, the Q&A question was lighting up around, why would we even bother? Like, why would you bother? So people are making that choice to sort of say, so, what is that going to do to Queensland properties? But at some point in time, if we don't have those borderless investors coming in here, now that the Labor government have announced a record investment into social housing, big tick there. I think that's excellent that they're doing that, but are still miles short of the demand that we need in regards to accommodation to handle the demand that we have in residential supply, in the sort of residential property space, the dwelling space. So it's just going to be constant big breaths, and we can't give up. And all I can say to our community out there, if you're affected by it, your property manager is your most important. They should be communicating to you if they haven't already communicated to you. That's important. But also, what's your responsibility? Talk to your local member. Ask them what their opinion is on these reforms, and bring it to their attention in terms of what this is going to mean, because they're going to be going to those town hall meetings where they're going to be yelled at because the rents have gone up. what are you doing about my rents? Why, and so I can understand that, because it's like, well, at the end of the day, we've put a huge reform program in place. And the reality is we don't have the mum and dad investors who are coming into this marketplace enough to provide the accommodation for you. And we as government don't have enough money to provide the accommodation for you. So, this is the consequences of what's happening. And hopefully we're not one and done here. Hopefully there will be some more common sense. We reintroduce the 120-day clause. We get better on this five strike policy. And we give some investors confidence. On the other side of it, we also make sure that the product that the landlords offer is of good quality, safe, reliable quality, that a tenant can enjoy quiet enjoyment in that asset. Really simple.
And Ben, let's be honest, the more people that you can get in Picker, the more opportunity that you have to actually provide a balanced voice, because in this case, there's been a strong voice on the other side that shows what the power of the people can do with an agenda. So, we'd love for people who are listening to this who aren't a member of Picker to join, so that there is more and more weight behind the conversations that you're having.
Yeah, there's two sides to every story, Bryce. And I think, we're even getting a rental commissioner and a deputy commissioner, aren't we, Hayley?
Oh, we've already got a commissioner for residential tenancies.
There we go.
She was in on 18th of September 2018, I think her date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I know who she is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
There we go. So we need to get a voice on the other side,
we
right?
do.
In terms of making sure we've got that.
Absolutely.
Picker.asn.au,
Bryce, that's where you get your membership. But again, talk to your local members as well, right? We just need to make sure that there's two sides to every story, and the answer's somewhere in the middle.
Absolutely.
Hayley, you're always generous with your time. You clearly understand the legislation really well. When we first met you, you said that you love reading through the legislation, and that you said that was unusual, but that's who you are. Clearly, that has not lost any of its appeal for you. So thank you for being so generous in sharing what you do. But I guess the final message here is that there are some angles to be worked. Quality property management really matters. And for some people, they will see past it and still continue to invest. And for others, they will see it as a barrier for coming into this market. But we always appreciate you coming and joining us on the couch.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Hayley.
All right, Ben. Interesting. Victoria.
It almost got a bit of a win session from me, didn't it? I'll probably get some feedback on that in terms of how annoyed I am on a couple of things. But more broadly speaking, there's some...
How's the chat with Rob?
Robert, we forgot this bit, mate. Is anyone working on that bit? Yeah. Oh, Lorraine's on that. Oh, okay, Lorraine.
Oh, mate, people are going to write in. Robert and Lorraine, mate, keep it to Karen. Everyone knows Karen from Bunnings. Just
Karen. Well, what's the old Yellow Pages ad when she forgot to put the ad in the Yellow Pages?
Oh yeah, yes.
Oh, was that one?
Oh, now that's again showing our age.
No, it was Jane.
Yeah. Not happy, Jan. That's what it was. Yeah.
Not happy, Jan. Anyway, but look, some positives in there, but also some challenges. So we just got to digest it and work through it. And we'll be talking a bit about it over the course, I suspect, of the next year or two.
Yeah, and I guess a shout out to all of our landlords, residential rental providers to be technical. Ben, that's the last time we're going to get technical. We'll stay landlords.
Yep.
That within our business, within our community, yes, you are going to have to spend a bit of money to get it back up to standard, but don't lose sight of the bigger picture here. Let's stay at 30,000 feet on what is on offer, because you can get in the weeds very quickly in that discussion.
Yep.
But what is on offer in this country, in this state, is increased demand, limited supply, if you're buying the right type of property in the right area. Let's be honest, if there are other places in the country that don't have the same supply and demand conditions where this would be catastrophic. But within Victoria, where you've got lots of people who want to move here, it's multicultural, it gets more than its fair share of immigration. So let's just keep that in mind as we move forward. But yep, you aren't going to be allowed to be a slumlord in this state. You will have to fork out a few bucks to get it up to standard. At some point, with a lag, you will eventually pass it on, unfortunately, to the tenant. So from the POV of the Victorian investor, hang in there. There's still cause for optimism on why you'd want to buy in this state.
And Bryce, what was the episode that we had Haley on before, which was a ripper when we were talking about the preliminary? Now it's become law.
That's a good question you ask. It was episode number 248 on the 5th of September 2019.
248. Go and have a listen to that. We're also putting into the show notes some of the summary documents from Victoria Consumer Affairs. So there will be some supporting information here. Of course, if you're a PICA member, we also have a deep dive into the legislation with Leah Callanan, the RAIV president. We also have the slide deck in there where it's also broken down. So we're going to make sure that we give you enough information to our community to educate you around what these changes are. We too are going to see how it all lands in terms of there's still obviously a lot of unanswered questions, which is really our sort of, underlying message to government today that we're flying a little blind here. So hopefully we'll get some answers for those questions over the coming weeks and months. And then we'll see where it all rests up, and hopefully we get a situation where tenants are better housed in a safer accommodation, but also landlords are also given control over their property to make sure that they get return on investment, as well as provide essential accommodation for those people who want to rent in their particular locale.
Well said. All right. My life hack today, Ben, is, as you know, I've been doing a fair bit of camping lately, got a camper trailer just before Christmas. I know you ship up to Yarrawonga a fair bit, and you haven't actually told the community that you've got a bit of lifestyle design coming at the end of the year, which you might want to update the crew in a second on what that looks like. But tell us, telescopic marshmallow forks. Are you across these, Ben? $8. My little camping tip. So my kids just love a good fire. We had the fire on the weekend, and they just, if they could have spent 2 days just stoking the fire and standing there and poking and prodding it, they would have been at their happiest. But we did the marshmallow. So we went down to BCF. It's not an advert for BCF, Anaconda, Bunnings, wherever you go, but just get those little telescopic marshmallow forks. Yeah. And they're a good sort of 70, 80 centimeters once they're fully extended. So it means that the kids can get the marshmallows without burning
now, all the diehards, Bryce, will be telling you, why don't you use a stick, mate? Why don't you use a stick? But that's true.
Well, the reason is because I'd spent 6 hours at the hospital that day trying to get a fishing hook out of my son's finger, and I didn't really want to go back because he'd burned his finger on the fire. So,
no, very true, very true. No, they are terrific. I have seen them. They are very, very cool.
So that's my life hack today for the campers in our community, Ben, who love a good marshmallow. So you want to give a little preview for your little lifestyle design, Ben? I wonder.
Well, I'm just here. So I'm taking long service leave, Bryce. I've been, doing this caper. I'm turning 50 this year. So I'm taking a couple of months off and heading to the Kimberleys and spending a couple of months up in the North Country, which I'm very much looking forward to with the family. So yeah, it should be a bit of fun. We'll do a few, maybe I'll check in over the course of that time. I'm sure we'll do a bit of planning around that, but yeah, a couple of months away. July and August, I'll be spending.
You're leaving me at the helm on my own, mate. You're on the couch on my own.
Heading up to the North Country for winter. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's if the border lets you in, mate. They might. Your wife's a good West Australian. They'll let her in. But
if there's any sign of a closure, we're getting on a plane. There's too much cancellation fees that'll cost me a fortune. So anyway, now listen, Bryce, what's making property news? I'll wrap it up quickly. I mean, all roads lead to obviously the announcement today. I'll take a deeper dive into the actual price growth numbers that were released by CoreLogic in my economic and interest rate update that I deliver next week after Easter. But I just wanted to focus in on what was pretty impressive weekend auction results, Bryce. We saw 3,791 homes taken to auction across all the capital cities this weekend, thanks to our good friends at CoreLogic, which was obviously the biggest weekend that we've seen. And it really did pass with flying colours. We saw the preliminary clearance rate, 84.4%, which was just nuts, right? So it's just a really busy market out there. You're going to have to, I think we've done the homework in teaching you guys what you need to do in terms of buying in a hot market. But certainly the indications are that the market's going to continue There was also another important bit of news that came out on Monday from the head of APRA, who is very much so Wayne Byers. He's going to be our big man in town. He's the one that's going to potentially
put his hand on the handbrake.
Yeah, he may do that. And we saw what happened in New Zealand last week, where the New Zealand government introducing laws which will allow you not to claim interest on any loans against your investment property, which is a big news story, as well as the loan to value throttles that they've also put on investors. So, that's big news over there. Now, anyway, Wayne Byers, he basically came out and said, what problem with property? He goes, our job is not to mandate property prices. Our job is to protect the financial system in terms of its stability. And at the moment, they're not seeing any issues. That's not to say that there may not be any issues coming. So, the focus will be on what they call the Council of Financial Regulators. They're the ones that people need to keep an eye on. But at this stage, they're saying nothing to see here. But if it continues to get growing too quickly, we will start to see whether they see that there's any risk in terms of people borrowing and putting any systemic risk into the financial system. And at the moment, again, nothing to see here. So we've got the regulators who are all, and that the RBA have come out and said the same thing, that it's okay at the moment, keep going, we're okay, nothing to see. And we're also seeing obviously a lot of pent up demand and some, in seeing some comments from the head of Ray White, which is the biggest real estate agency group in Australia. What they are also saying is over the course of the next couple of months, they're seeing supply side program increasing, which is good news for all of those buyers who are missing out. There's potentially more stock coming onto the market as well. So that is hopefully the good news story, which will see some type of balance come into the market, because we really can't see property prices growing at this level of pace indefinitely. But there could be still 12 months of this level of growth over that time. So it's a good time to be owning property in Australia.
Absolutely. Well, folks, I hope you are looking forward to your 4-day, hopefully for most of you, 4-day break minimum over the weekend. For those of you celebrating Easter, happy Easter to you. For the rest of you, have a wonderful break. And Ben, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarizes the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.